Okay, and we're live. Okay, hello everyone. So very happy to see you again for this new session. So it's a new format today. We are experimenting using Twitch, and for this first session available on Twitch, I'm very happy to host. So Eva Ferreira. Eva, hello.
Hello, thank you for
So
having me here.
yes, you're welcome. I'm very happy. So Eva is a engineering manager at Fabriik, and she's also a front-end developer. And because she sees that there was some problems of accessibility and technical debt in a previous project she was working on, she decided to create this talk you are going to see right now. So if you have questions for Eva, you can directly use the chat, and we will ask of your questions at the end of its talk. So Eva, you can start now. The audience is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you all. And it's also a pleasure to be wearing this amazing blazer at home and not feeling weird about it. So thanks for giving me the chance to do that. I'm Eva. I love CSS and I love creating this kind of very useless animations because, CSS is amazing. Back 2 years ago, I organized CSS Conf Argentina, a conference, non-profit conference for the Latin America community, and hopefully we will bring it again sometime. So look it up in Twitter if you're interested. So yeah, that course. I know you might feel like we are entering a kind of the Godfather situation in here, but I swear that the dead horse is something else. The dead horse actually comes from the idea of beating a dead horse. And I know this sounds worse when you read it literally, but actually, beating a dead horse is an idiom that says to waste time and effort trying to do something that is impossible. That is a quote by Mr. Beer and Webster. Basically, it means technical debt. Um, sometimes. But the funny thing is that whenever we speak about technical debt, we don't usually speak about it this way. We usually speak about it this way. It's like the whole room is on fire and you have to keep on working and keep on pretending that nothing is wrong and just keep on delivering. Deadlines are still approaching and all that. So we are not usually calm when we speak about technical debt, but we do try to pretend because it's all there is. So we end up with memes as a coping mechanism for technical debt. Like, just put the technical debt on my credit card, moving fast and breaking things, fragile development guide. I don't understand why it takes so long to add a new window while your house has a few issues. Let's fix this with a temporary solution. And that will create more problems in the long run. Yes, we will have changed jobs by then. And one of my favorites is not tech debt if you're not around when it gets fixed. But I usually like to rephrase it as it's not tech debt if you're not around when it begins to cause trouble. Because it's not really about when it gets fixed, it's about when it begins to be an issue. So, what is technical debt actually? What isn't technical debt? Is technical debt bad code? Is technical debt just, something different but bad code? Well, for me personally, bad code is not really technical debt, but it is a lack. It's a lack of something. It is a lack of knowledge. It is a lack of caring. It is a lack of quality control. For me, bad code is usually more harmful than technical debt because it means that there is something very seriously wrong in the company. And many times I heard developers, senior developers, or managers, or product managers blaming trainee developers and junior developers for bad code. And you know what? It's not their fault. It's just very easy to blame a trainee developer when the reality is you just wanted to save some money and hire a trainee developer and left them on their own. And they are probably having a very hard time working a lot and you need to help them. You need to be next to a trainee developer and to help them grow and to help them not make huge mistakes that get into production. If you don't get that, then the issue is you, the issue is the company, the issue is not the trainee developer. So honestly, I mean that bad code is not for me technical debt, but honestly, it's just a lack of quality control and a lack of caring about the final product. So what is that debt then? Well, technical debt is a conscious trade-off. And to add another quote, technical debt happens when we choose to gain something otherwise unattainable immediately in return for paying it back with interest later on. This is a Maldives quote by Harry Roberts. Harry Roberts is a wonderful developer, lives somewhere in the UK. He has a very good sense of humor, and he has some very great CSS and performance talks that you can find on YouTube and some articles that you can find online. So if you haven't heard of him, I highly recommend that you follow him online on Twitter because he's an amazing person and developer. But coming back to the quote, so otherwise unattainable immediately and paying it back. That's exactly what is technical debt. Technical debt is something that you create consciously, and you say, I'm going to make a choice, I'm going to develop something fast in order to have it implemented very quickly. And knowingly, I will write code that is not scalable. So let's take the theming example. Let's take it that you are a company that provides services to another companies and you provide an application to other companies. And you have your clients and they are very happy. But one day a client, a huge possible client, comes to you and say, I'm going to be your client if you provide theming to your application so that it can be as branded colors as my company, so that it can have the green that I have in my company, the blue that I have in my company. So you go to the developers in charge and you ask them, hey, can we do that? Can we have theming for this client? Because it would be amazing. And the developers tell you, well, we don't currently have theming apply in our project. It will take us perhaps 3 to 4 weeks to get this done. And 3 to 4 weeks would mean to lose this client. So what you do is basically say, okay, I'm going to fix this in 3 days. It's going to be awful, but it's going to work. And we are going to do that only for this very client. So what you do, you import all the things. You import all the brand colors that this client wants, and you deliver very, very specific things for only these clients. So you end up like, this is my garbage, and I'm proud of it. And you should, because basically that horrible code that you just delivered had got the company money. And that is great, because that way you were able to provide the client what they wanted in a very short amount of time. So congrats, you just created your first technical debt. You made this conscious decision of creating very kind of horrible code in order to get something instead. And you know that you will have to repay. Now the question is, will you repay? Well, you have two paths. One is happy and the other one is very dark. The happy path is to repay and say, okay, now I did this, we got the client, we got the money, now we should sit down and properly do theming for the future clients that come up. So I'm going to need, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to fix this in a very calm and relaxed way. And that is a happy path. But the other one is, just pretend nothing happened and keep on working as if whatever and never fixing that. So the consequences of prepaying are very big. You have only one client who asks you for theming, so that means that you only have your code with a few importance around the place. But what if another client, client B, comes up and say, hey, I want theming too? So then you have to, okay, put importance again for client B. And then client C comes and client D, and suddenly your whole situation was made a lot worse. And the consequences of repaying are that basically you accumulate interest. Every time you don't repay your technical debt gets worse and worse and worse. And it also begins creating a snowball effect where fellow developers will see an important in the code and it will be like, oh, look, that's an important. if an important was used, and that means I can use an important too. So it creates this huge snowball that is falling and falling and falling and getting bigger all the time, and it will cause you issues, obviously. And last but not least, team members are sad. So as a developer, I really don't like working with legacy code and code that has a lot of technical debt, because you simply cannot do your best. You simply don't have the opportunities of learning as much. And besides, it's not only about developers being sad, the whole team will be sad. Product managers will be sad when you will tell them that that feature they want will actually take ages because the code is not very good. Designers will be sad because you will tell them that that feature they want, that very border radius, won't be able to be implemented on time because the code is very bad. So basically, not repaying technical debts will bring you a lot of issues. So how do we repay technical debt? And what I mean in this talk is, how do we repay the accessibility part of technical debt? Wait, is accessibility technical debt? No, it isn't. I mean, it shouldn't be, but it actually is. So if you take a look at the current state of most websites, you will find that most websites are not really accessible. They don't have the basic features for accessibility. And this happens as a conscious decisions of every day, where developers and designers are in a hurry, are in a rush, and they don't really care about accessibility, and they just put it out there in production without checking with a screen reader, without checking with a keyword navigation to see if it works for people with disabilities. And I can prove this, sadly. So there's this company called WebAIM that runs a couple of surveys every year, and one of the surveys that they run is an annual accessibility analysis of the top 1 million homepages. And what they do is they run a basic WCAG test. That's a very annoying thing to pronounce. So what is this test? Well, it includes, but is not limited to, checking for alternative text for images, AA contrast ratio, which is the basic contrast between background color and text color, labels for input, document language attributes, and buttons and links with discernible text. So they run this every year on the top 1 million homepages in the whole web. How did they come out? Was it like at least 20% of the websites passed this test? Was it at least 10? Was it at least 5? How bad do you all think it is? And I know I'm not seeing you for, to see your answers. But the sad reality is that it wasn't even 5. Only 2.6% of websites pass those basic tests. So that means that 98% of the top 1 million websites on the internet are not accessible. 98. And the most common errors are basically these errors that sometimes can be fixed with just one line of code. Something interesting, if you want to take a look at the analysis, is that you will find a lot of very wonderful fun facts, like despite being 2021, 14,501 homepages had marquee tag and 341 homepages have linking content. I know you might be too old, too young perhaps to know what a marquee tag is, but it was something very fun that we did back then. Luckily, we don't do it anymore, so don't do it. And there's a link for the WebAIM analysis if you want to take a look later. It's extremely interesting and it's extremely sad at the same time. So why does this happen? Well, lack of accessibility is more often than not conscious trade-offs. It's basically sometimes users with disabilities are considered as second-class citizens of the web. Like they don't deserve the time of developing a website the right way. So people end up, just not testing for accessibility and not working towards accessibility. And that is how these issues come into play. So even though I don't really enjoy calling it technical debt, because it shouldn't, because a website should be accessible by default all the time. It shouldn't be a trade-off. It was a trade-off. And that is why we have come to this place of 98% of websites not being accessible. So, okay, how do we begin repaying the accessibility technical debt? I honestly figured out two ways of fixing it depending on what you want to fix. So first of all, how do you fix current technical debt? So you have it, another thing to fix, which is the future. But if you want to worry about what is happening right now at your products, what you are going to do probably is run audit. So you can run an audit like the Web Aim audit. They have a tool. You can run Lighthouse extension if you want, or you can even use Acts by Deck, which is another extension to check accessibility. And you can also check manually to find different accessibility issues. So once you run the audit, you will need to spare some time to improve it. And that honestly is the hardest thing. So what I recommend is try to and do at least 50% of the sprint in accessibility fixes and do very small, well-defined tasks. So if you go into Jira and you create a ticket that says fix accessibility, it's not really realistic. You need to be more specific because what you need to do is you need to have a proper fixing schedule of things that you are really fixing and that you can see how they get fixed over time. So for that to work, you need to have very well defined and small task. For example, the outlines are not working on focus. So fix the outlines on focus. And you end up fixing those bugs very slowly, very slowly. It will take months. And you know it will take a long, long time. And that's okay. You don't have to fix it one day to the other. And then in some situations, you will need to do a little bit more work. For example, you might need to rebuild certain components. Perhaps you have a component that is so broken that it cannot really be fixed with just one line of code, and that you will need to sit down and rewrite it. And then basically try to build new features again as a slow and very small predefined task. For example, you can build a skip navigation feature. If you're not familiar with the skip navigation feature, it's a feature that is very useful to people who use keyboard navigation because it helps them jump from one section to the other of the content without having to go through every element that is focusable on the screen. So that might take a lot of time. And then track and document. Why? Well, because if you don't have time to fix it, then you can write down that you have that issue and put it in the backlog. And I know that when I say put it in the backlog, it really brings to my mind this meme, which is amazing. It's like, senior dev, put it in the backlog. Junior dev, so we can fix it later, right? So we can fix it later. But I know this is fun. I know this is partially true. But the reality is that you cannot repay what you don't acknowledge. So if you have issues and you are not ready to fix them yet, still create that Jira ticket and put it in the backlog, because that will mean that everybody around you will be aware of their issues that are there, and not just you. It's not only in your head, it's actually written down. Then another thing to take into account is to, avoid creating more technical debt, which is very fun and it sounds very easy, but it's not that easy to do. And in order to avoid creating more, what you need is you need to learn certain things, and you need everybody around you to be more aware of different things. This is something that will be a very long-term thing. It would take months, maybe years, to actually make this right. First of all, you need a cultural change in the company. So if you look around your products and you see that none of them actually pass a very basic test for accessibility, then that means that probably there is something wrong in the culture of the company. Perhaps they don't know about accessibility, perhaps they don't care, but basically you need to fix it. And there are different ways to fix it, but what you need is that you need people who care. And honestly, you need people in the C level to care about accessibility so that it gets more easily done and put into meetings and speak about. So you will need to also update some processes. you will need to create some automated tests. Hopefully build them into your continuous integration and pipelines. So what you can do is you can grab Lighthouse, put Lighthouse in your pipeline for continuous integration. And you can use a minimum value of acceptance. So if you run Lighthouse right now, you get, okay, I get 70 out of 100 in accessibility. So I know that next time I send something to production, I should get at least 70 in accessibility by Lighthouse. So that way, you know that you are not creating new accessibility technical debt, and you know that you are not fixing the mistakes because you don't have time, but that you are not creating new issues for accessibility. And all that can be built into the pipelines and, make sure that you don't send something to production that is not right. Then something else is manual test. I know that many QA people are not really into manual tests. I know that developers sometimes are not really into, testing things, even though that's part of a job. But the reality of accessibility is that only 30% of accessibility bugs can be found by automated tests. The other 70 can only be found by manual tests. And that the reason behind that is that many things about accessibility are about reading and listening and just trying things out. For example, you can automate to check for alternative text for images. You can do that. It's automated in Lighthouse, in AxDeck, in whatever tool for accessibility you find. It's automated to check for those accessible text for images. But how do you know if that text is the right one? How do you know if the alternative text is not just image? So that means there is an accessibility issue, but the automated test won't find it because automatically that passes the test. But in a manual test, that will come up as an accessibility issue. So you need to manually test things. And if you're lucky enough to have a QA team, you can actually sit down with the QA people and teach them how to do this and teach them how to test for accessibility. And something that we have been implementing slowly inside the company is to have internal demos. So we have internal demos of new features and we show them around to the whole company. Sometimes we are lucky enough that the CTO and CEO show up and, take a look at those demos. And what we began doing was to do those demos with a screen reader as well as the usual demo. So we show the new feature using our cursor, using our trackpad, and then we show the same feature using a screen reader and using keyboard navigation. So the idea of this is to bring more awareness into the company about screen readers and keyboard navigation and things that perhaps in their everyday they don't see or use, or perhaps they didn't know they existed. So suddenly we found ourselves with people it was the first time that they actually listened to a screen reader and they didn't even know how it sounded. So it came out to be very, very interesting and very important to bring more awareness inside the company and to bring on that cultural change about the importance of accessibility, to just do demos with a screen reader, with keyboard navigation and such. Another way to basically fix it, hopefully forever, is to begin using design systems. So design system and component libraries are a way of creating different components that you can do in React or Angular and to share it with other products. So what you do is you centralize the components and you spread them across the company. And that means that you can actually fix accessibility once and once for all inside the design system. And that will be available for all the developers in the company. So all the developers in the company will be able to use that component, and that component will be already tested and it will work okay. And whatever Brad Frost and Sheena and say, who are two people who love design system and have a lot of wonderful things on the internet about it, so you can Google them as well. Sheena has this website, you can Google her, and Brad Frost has this other one who is, he writes a lot about design system, has been writing about atomic design and all that for like the last 10 years of his life. So, Another thing that you can do in the long term to fix accessibility and front end is to hire front end developers. Ha! You can never guess a front end issue could be fixed by front end developers. And I know that this sounds fun and whatever, and it's like, yeah, but we do hire front end developers. Do you? Or do you hire full stack developers? Because the thing about the full stack developers is that they are an amazing thing full of knowledge about so many different things. And it's great to have a full stack developer in your company. But when it comes to writing responsive, accessible layouts, a front-end developer will know best. So do hire front-end developers, do hire people who love CSS and accessibility. Call them front of the front, call them UI engineers, whatever name you want. But in order to really fix accessibility, you do need front-end developers in your company, not just full-stack developers. Then another thing to take into account is that no code can fix bad design. If the design is inaccessible, so is a website. So if you have bad UX flows in your product, then that means that the user will get lost. It doesn't matter how much code you put in there, how much HTML5 or CSS4 or CSS5 or whatever. If the UX is wrong, then the website will be confusing. And the same thing goes for the UI. If you have a UI that doesn't have very good contrast and you're the developer, you will end up building this. And the reality, the sad reality of this is that you cannot really add code that design. There's no way around to it. You cannot really add code that decisions either. You actually need to work in a team. Accessibility right now in 2021 is a teamwork. So it basically means that you need to work together with designers, with product people, and with other fellow developers in order to be able to create a truly accessible product for everyone. So remember that you cannot really avoid technical debt because technical debt is actually a good thing. It's a good thing to do trade-off at the right time. But the reality is that you can avoid putting the burden on users with disabilities. So try to slowly improve your website, to slowly improve your products, and have a lot of faith and put a lot of effort into design system and component libraries, because that's where the trick is, to actually fix it once and test it once and for it to be able to work properly everywhere. So I hope you enjoyed this talk. I will be around for questions.
Yes, so we have some questions in the chat.
That's great.
Which one? First, do you consider that if a single person knows a feature and its code, it is a path leading you to technical debt?
If a single person knows a feature and its code is fast leading you to technical debt. Let's see if I understood that correctly. So if you don't have your code documented, then that might lead to bad code. I wouldn't say that that will lead to technical debt, because again, technical debt will be a trade-off, and it depends on what it means to not document it. So if you're not documenting your code, eventually will cause trouble. But if you're the only one working in there and if you have a very good memory, then you might be fine. Honestly, personally, I had issues with my own code. I went into my own code and said, why did I write this line of code? I wish I had commented it. Yeah.
Okay. Did you consider that Web Core Vitals as a mandatory take for avoiding future tech debt?
Yeah, which is very sad, because usually I teach at university, and when you usually teach new developers to code, they usually just jump straight into React, straight into Angular, and they forget the basics. And suddenly you see their code and it's a lot of div tags, and it's like, did you ever hear about section elements, article elements, semantics in CSS? And they should be taken more care of.
Yeah, okay. I just have one question personally. Do you think that CSS maintainability is frequently underestimated and generate debt?
Oh yes, and
Yeah.
I think CSS in general is,
Yeah.
underestimated, and people consider it as being easy and just a bunch of colors, and suddenly it grows and it will eat you alive.
Okay. Do you have a magical formula for convincing a team manager to take technical debt in the sprint?
And honestly, it usually ends up being an easy thing to do when they come at you with a new feature and you tell them how long it will take because of the technical debt that you have. So when you show that it's slowing you down, that's when other people begin to worry about it.
Yeah, true. I think that this one. Wait. Yeah. How do you prioritize your technical debt according to users' feedback, team feedback, tools report?
That's a very good question. I do try to have a little bit of all, and also it depends on how much time you have. So perhaps you don't have much time, so what you can do is you can only fix very like one line of code issues. So if you can afford spending a little bit more time, then I will go into what the users are asking and a little bit of what the developers are asking, because again, you need the developer to be happy and comfortable working with their code base. So it's a little bit of a mixture, it depending on how much time you actually have.
Thank you. Did you promote manual tests by user concerns, by accessibility problem like blind people?
And did you promote manual tests by users concerned by accessibility problems of black people?
Mm.
Yes and no. Luckily, I'm very fortunate to be to have a QA team that does manual testing all the time. So I was lucky enough not to have to sell it to anybody. But if you have to sell it, then that takes a little bit of work, and it also takes a little bit of getting used to. Like you do have to get used to using a screen reader if you haven't used one before, because it's a whole software that runs on your machine. It's not that easy. So it takes a little bit of time, and you have to do a little bit of work to convince, especially people for QA that perhaps do a lot of automation, to just step down and do a little bit of manual testing as well.
Okay. A question from Thomas. How would you deal with PO stakeholders which insist on having monetary value for ROI on all stories, including technical
Well,
depth?
yeah. So my main selling point for accessibility is that many people go ahead and ask, okay, how many people actually use a screen reader? How many people have disabilities? And when you go to, OMS is 15% of the population, and you can find yourself with someone that would say, okay, 15% is not too much. But the reality is that when you work with accessibility, you're not just working with those 15%, you're working with different kind of things. So accessibility is not necessarily a permanent thing. It can be a permanent thing. That's the 15%, but it can also be a temporary situation. Like, for example, when we work towards a website that can be used with a keyboard, what we do, we think we are working towards someone with mobility issues. And the reality is that perhaps in our mind, we have someone without an arm. But in reality, in like everyday situations, you will find people who temporarily have their arm broken, and it will be like only 3 weeks with a thing on their arm. And in those 3 weeks, those people will use their computer and the technology in a different way that they usually do. So, what I do try to say all the time when I'm trying to sell accessibility is it seems like it's only 15% of the population, but actually it's way more. And in the future, it will be all of us, because we will hopefully get very old. We won't be able to see as well and hear as well as we do when we are young.
Okay. Next question. Is a full technical debt fixing sprint a good solution, or should it be tackled little by little?
It should be tackled little by little, unless it's a very specific technical debt. But when it comes to accessibility, accessibility is pretty much like performance. You never finish the job. It's a continuous improvement. So you will always have you will always find new things to improve. So it's very long term. Yeah.
Okay, so do you think that agility is always a part of the solution to avoid technical debt?
If I think that accessibility is, yeah,
Yeah,
because what you do is you simply do things right the first time and you will avoid a lot of issues. If you
yeah, okay.
use the right HTML tags, then you're pretty much done. Half of the way. Yeah.
Okay, do we have done all the question? Or I have a last one for you. Would you say that some framework generates more technical debt than other, like React or Vue or Angular or other?
Yeah. The reality is that they are pretty much all the same, but this website that I mentioned, WebAIM, actually has a survey, the analysis of the 1 million websites. It has the analysis and it says in the whole thing that is very long how well or worse React versus Angular versus Vue versus Svelte are. So you can actually find it there. The difference is very small, but there is a tiny difference between React and Angular. I don't remember which one was better than worse, but in that analysis that you can find that information.
Did you, at some point, measure the impact of ID1Y improvements on other metrics, like revenue, CTR, vibrancy?
Well, I didn't measure it myself, but if you have a more accessible website, you have more users that can use it. So basically, more users means more money for the company. Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any more question, I think.
Indeed. I think it's good for tonight. Okay. So thank you again, Eva. I share your slide in the chat of Twitch, and I think we will also share them directly on our Twitter account. So if someone has a last question, it's right now. After it will be too late. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for having me.
Yes, thank you, Eva. It was
Thank
very
you.
interesting and very inspiring.
Yes.
People enjoy the talk.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so everyone, bye bye. See you next
Bye.
time. Thank you, Eva, again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.